All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. I'd love to hear a little bit about the story of the project. I know it's a bigger project here for the county, but just walk me through kind of the inception and then where we are today. And if somebody who's resident of the county has heard about the project, kind of what it is and what it entails.
Yeah, no, thanks, Josh. And let me see if I can kind of frame it up in general terms a little bit. And the property is located on the northern side of Nipomo, right along 101.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're driving north from Santa Maria, let's say, and you pass where the swap meet is, it's the first big open field on the left-hand side, and it's about 288 acres. Um, it's been in the county's general plan to be developed since mid 90s, 1994 5, and in the South County area plan to be developed as well. Actually, and I think it was 2018 when the county was trying to figure out where we're going to actually build some houses to try to catch up on the housing inventory that we have. They tried to identify properties all over the county, and in South County, they identified, which the Kanata Ranch, which is now the Dana Reserve, as the place that the county termed could move the needle in housing for South San Luis Obispo County. We actually purchased the property in section pieces,
Mm.
beginning in 2018 and finishing it up in 2019. We started planning for it, and I mean by planning, hiring architects, engineers, surveyors, soil analysis companies, beginning in early 2018.
Mm.
And over the period of a couple of years and 28 versions of a plan, because it was really difficult to figure out how to meld together our ultimate goals with physical and economic constraints, and end up with something that would achieve what we were trying to accomplish on that property, which was candidly to find a way to house families in meaningful numbers at prices and both for rent and for sale, that is not being offered currently in San Luis Obispo County, and maybe has never been offered this before in San Luis Obispo County. So that was kind of the goal.
So you went through 20, and so there's going to be 1,300 homes. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually after the Planning Commission was increased a little bit to add some more inclusionary housing, which I would say, warmly embraced. Those are deed restricted houses for 55 years. So it's now 1,370. And then the Planning Commission also made a request, and these are requests, they don't have to be acted on this way by the Board of Supervisors, but they made a request to also add an obligation to build 100 ADUs, and these in this case are junior ADUs, in the project. So rather than just entitle them, actually build them to create some
Mm.
more affordable housing as well. And that cuts both ways because it adds the price of the home, but it certainly creates a less expensive place for somebody to live in the ADU.
And there is a section as well in the development that incorporates an education element, and there's also the neighborhood uh, barn as well. Could you expand upon that and how that collaboration happened, and is that still part of it?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's a large enough property and has enough scale that what we wanted to do is, if you wanted to, and I'm not suggesting anybody do this, but if you wanted to live there, not have a car, just have a bike, or not even a bike, that you could basically survive with everything there and meet all your daily needs. You go down and have a restaurant, little pub. I'm an Irishman, you have to have a pub, grocery store, basically all your daily needs. So that was, set up with, we've got, I think it's 3.8 miles of hiking trails, many parks, and then we also have Cuesta College, which is the education component that you were talking. It's a satellite campus, so it's nothing like Cuesta in really either in San Luis Obispo or the larger one that they have in Paso. This is a smaller location with only 4 acres. And then the village barn that you mentioned there, it's actually, we call it the village commercial, and it's a combination of kind of agrarian style architecture, which kind of fits in with Nipomo. It has a barn which would have multiple tenants in it and kind of a meeting place both around the outside and covered porches and kind of an old style look, but also some interior open space as well that would maybe facilitate, meetings or things for people, along with multiple other, and again, I'll go back to the restaurant, brew pubs, coffee, bakery type locations. And in this case, because it was a recurring comment that came from the 90 some meetings that we've had with the community, that healthcare and the availability of doctors in Nipomo is really deficient. And so we've committed to 6 to 8,000 foot facility for medical use. And that's, dedicated solely to medical use as part of it.
Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting to me. I think it's really a smart way to go to incorporate the commercial and the residential and the multifamily, because I've noticed a trend, and maybe from the 70s, 80s, 90s, where there's stark differentiation between commercial, between shopping, between residential, and it was very car friendly. You have your residential, you're going to drive over to do your shopping and your shopping centers. But I've seen a trend, and it seems like you're right in alignment with that, with this style of having people live in communities, not only for the housing and the architectural style or maybe the open spaces, but also how convenient it is to have a lifestyle experience that where they don't have to get in a car and drive. And the difference between, let's say, a family or even somebody who maybe is retired and being able to go from their house, put their walking shoes on or their scooter or bike or whatever it is, and just bike over with maybe some friends that they have over to experience a coffee shop or medical services. So there's this incorporation where a community, it's almost like a mini village, like a mini town. So I think that's really clever, and I think it's a trend that people really appreciate. I think the San Luis Ranch as well, and San Luis incorporates this a little bit, but it sounds like you're even leaning into it even more if what I'm hearing you say is right.
Yeah, we have the benefit of a larger, plot of land, and more to work with, so we were able to do a little bit more. Um, but it goes, what you're saying is completely correct, and it gives you a different experience living there. That you can't get if you every time you need something you have to hop in the car. Um, but it also helps on a couple of other things. From an environmental perspective. Um, we've got, so we did several things, and some were kind of painful to do, and things that probably because I'm an old guy, didn't just jump off the table at me and say, yeah, this is what we should do. But this is going to be an all electric. Um, all homes will be only electric, all solar. Every home will have solar. There will be gas, natural gas in the restaurants and in those facilities, the commercial facilities. But any residence will be all electric and so with solar and wired for battery if you choose to put it in. And
Wow.
then we went out and went a little bit further and said, let's see if we can kind of extend both the northbound and southbound bus transit connections. And we really got a warm embrace for the southbound transit center, who'd always been trying to get some of the circulation that we are completing as part of this project, meaning the extension of roads, finished. And so we are
Hmm.
finishing several streets that have long been planned by the county but not built. And that will allow for better bus service. So they're very excited about coming in, as is SlowCog, San Luis Obispo County. They'll need to do another study on it. But then we've also added in a park and ride for not just the people who live there, but also the community right up off of Willow, that will
Hmm.
allow them to maybe take advantage of some of this new and more frequent bus service coming out of there. So it's certainly, there will be, everybody will have their cars, but it's we're trying to see if there's some things that we could do there that would maybe minimize some of the greenhouse gas effect that is part of the one of the trade-offs that we've got when you bring that many people into an area. And um, it's it's been beneficial, I think, when we've gone through the numbers to say how does this project stack up. Um, it's been a good thing.
I think that's a great segue into the next question, and it sounds like you've really been thoughtful about, mitigating environmental impact, mitigating traffic, and whatnot. How would you respond? Because I know there's a large contingent of the county that's very pro what you're doing, me being one of them, as far as incorporating more housing options for people, and just providing what our county needs, which is more housing. Um, but obviously, there's always two sides of the story, and there's another group which seems quite vocal, but smaller, that it has some concerns. So I was curious if you could just talk through what the main concerns are that people have and how you're mitigating those. I know traffic being one of them. I know the removal of oak trees being one of them. But you're planting oak trees as well. Just talk me through what some of the, I guess, concerns are, and then what you've done to sort of address those. And for people who are on the fence and are like, well, we need new housing, we need new homes for people, but also we want to maintain some of the Central Coast appeal. How would you dialogue through those, to those people, and kind of make them see the vision that you have?
Yeah, so I think, let's speak to the trees because that is certainly the most vocal, the
Mm.
loudest portion of the kind of criticisms that come from some of the neighbors and maybe not, and from other people that are not just neighbors, removing oak trees. And we're taking out slightly over 3,000 oak trees. So it's a lot of oak trees, and it's a big ask. It's a big ask of the community. Um, and it's not something that we take lightly. And it's also part of the reason that the density is there. And
Mm.
and our measuring stick from the very beginning is how many trees or how many homes can we produce per tree taken out. And it was really so it ended up being the reverse. Is we were actually taking out 2.1 trees for every house that's being generated. We're also, though, conserving through a mix of replanting and conservation of existing trees, 11.8 trees per house that we're generating. So and I don't have the exact number, but there's between plantings, which we're doing about 1,550 plus or minus, and then conservation of trees that are on site that I think is like 1,900. And then we purchased another 388 acres that was originally part of the same property. Um, and but it was right across, it's across the freeway. It's about 2 miles away. It was part of the original
Okay.
Rancho Nipomo. And it has about 14,000 oak trees on it. So we purchased that. Our intent is to place a permanent conservation easement on that. And then after the permanent conservation easement is on that 388 acres with those 14,000 oak trees, we are donating that to the Dan Adobe, who's kind
Mm.
of, there kind of to make sure people understand and remember the history of maybe Captain Dana and Rancho Nipomo. And and then I think in the long term, I think they are still developing their ideas, but I think what they would like to do was be able to have some of that be open, or some of it, or lots of it open to potential, whether it's tours or hiking for people in South County, and whether it's a few times a year or frequently, that'll be up to them to decide. But to kind of create some public benefit out of that,
Mm.
um, I, I I I can understand the um, the concern on trees, and I think it's been kind of stated. Well, it's a false binary to say you either have trees or you have housing, and you're pitting the two against each other. And to some extent, that's completely true. However, what's missing in that dialogue is that because of the affordability that we're trying to bake into this project, and because of the density that we're putting in, and because of the infrastructure, this is raw land, right? Surrounded on three sides by homes and a freeway on the fourth. Um, it has an enormous amount of infrastructure that has to go in. It's over $40 million before you start to do anything with individual lots or stuff. And so there is certain math that has to be achieved to be able to even get to a project. And so that's the trade-offs that we did. And especially in our goal, it was that balancing act of trees per home, and which is why it took us 28 versions of the plan. It really took us about 25 versions of the plan to actually come up with a formula, and then about three more to kind of fine tune it before we actually submitted the first plan to the county. And then there was many more after that, but with little changes at that point. So that is it. And the other one you'd mentioned was circulation and traffic. It's interesting. So there's been a comprehensive traffic study that was done, then updated twice. I think both in 2022, maybe the third time was in 2023. I don't remember.
Oh,
But in that study, I believe 13 intersections in Nipomo, as identified by the county, were studied. And after the project is complete, so this means fully built out and fully occupied, with and which means we put in all the improvements and the continuation of roads that weren't built, and signals where we need to add signals, and roundabouts where we need to add roundabouts. Every one of those 13 intersections operates either at the same level as it does today or better. And that's after the project's finished. So it's a little bit of a hard thing for people, especially if you don't look at all the infrastructure we're putting in and the connections, that the roads that those roads have been planned by the county because it improved circulation. It just is, they were expensive to put in. So we're doing it, and it's part of the project. It's also part of the reason it's a challenge to figure out how to make the math work.
thanks for sharing it. I think that's another segue, because I'd love to just kind of dive into the process with with this, right? Because this is a big project, and with you heading this up, and I know some of the other projects that you've worked on have set you up for success on this one. But I'd like to just frame this question out like this. Being in real estate myself and working with investors, I know it can be quite challenging to develop. There are risk factors that a lot of people can't stomach. It's working with the city and county, the planning department, going through all of these revisions, working with the community, working with professionals like architects, working with the process of even just managing the waste, right, and the sewer and all of that. Walk me through your advice and what you've learned, through your years of experience in doing this. What advice would you give to maybe young entrepreneur that is looking to get into development and would like to know what kind of mental skill sets should they have, determination, collaboration? What kind of skill sets do you think are important to have to build out a project like this, to go from vision, imagination, to actual success, so that people can enjoy a lifestyle and living in a home, calling the Central Coast home? And just what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about doing maybe something like this, but on a much smaller scale, maybe 20 home development or 30 home development? Yeah, if you could share a little bit about that, that would be I'd be really interested to hear that.
That's a big question because
Take
there's
just a little piece of it if you want.
yeah, no. It's because there's lots that goes into that. And I will say I have lived my life always with a fair bit of fear in the background. It's not really
Mm.
want of success, it's fear of failure that drives you a little bit. And so I think, and I'll use the project, and then I'll say how would that maybe relate to someone else looking. at another project, whether it's smaller, same size, whatever, is, what are the goals? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And in this one, and I would say this is not a normal goal, and it was probably not one. I certainly would not say this is a goal that, as a young guy or a new person getting into real estate, that I would say this is the first priority you should have. In this case, I considered our priorities kind of a little bit of a later in career type focus that only is basically allowed because we've been, I call it, blessed with a lot of good fortune in other projects and other things, and both from the food and ag business and real estate, and and so it's, but this one for us was, how do we get people in homes that, as I said, and in prices that otherwise they can never get, and that's not easy. But then I think for somebody looking at this, I think you want to be realistic in terms of the challenges of a project, and especially if it involves entitlements. And I think communication, and more communication, is always better, whether it's with partners or cities or county or municipalities, whatever it is. And I think the other thing that's important is, I think it's most beneficial for the guy that's trying to develop it is not to look at the city or the county as the enemy. They're a partner, and you may not always agree. And in fact, you're bound to not always agree. But I think transparency of the issues, when they say, well, gosh, you need to do this, and you say, well, that's great, except that causes me this issue. And then how do we find a solution around that? And so I think being upfront and candid, and don't compromise any facts, meaning that you just lay them out there. I think that helps to get things to the finish line. Certainly in this project, we haven't always agreed with what the county has said. I would hope that they would say, and I've been fairly transparent process all the way through. I think they would. But I think that is important. And I also think that whatever you think it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, they're both wrong. It will cost more and take longer. So the revenue needs to be, you need to be careful on when you look. You have to start off with a bigger margin potential than you probably are going to end up achieving. It just seems to always work that way on every project we've ever done, with maybe only one or two exceptions. And so either we were always too optimistic or we were just bad operators. But either way, that's the way it always worked out. But we still could, you make it work. And then the last thing is kind of a work ethic from my perspective, and determination. And and I was always terrible in sports, even though I was felt really competitive, but I couldn't figure out why all those other kids could do it so much better than I could. And so my competitive spirit just switched to then business, and so I thought I'll outwork and anybody, and not as trying to. It's kind of just a competitive thing that I guess I probably grew up with, and then I enjoy it. I'm a bad golfer, and I have a wonderful wife and 4 kids and 3 grandkids now. So that's one side of life, and the other part is doing real estate and a few other little hobbies on the side. So so I would say hard work and determination is key, because sometimes you have to be willing, after you get kicked in the teeth, to stand back up and go, okay, we're at it again, and what did I learn from that last kick that maybe I need to change?
Yeah, thank you for sharing those all those comments really ring true to me and to some of the other developers that I've dialogued with. And I think it's important to have that determination and that vision strongly embraced, especially in the early phase where everything it's not tangible yet. You can work through the plannings, entitlements, the process of communication, but you're still in your imagination going, okay, well, this is what we are intending to create, but we're not seeing the framing go up. We're not seeing the foundations poured. We're not seeing the painting crews out, and we're not seeing the sidewalks go in or the trees being planted, or the, commercial space being done, but having that determination, that competitive edge to go, okay, I'm going to see this through. I'm going to make sure that we've got the vision and the commitment and the team to get it to fruition. But that testing time where it's not tangible yet, but it's going to be, I think really is important for any entrepreneur, and especially a developer like yourself, that the runway is a pretty long runway where money's going out and the money's not coming in until you're selling the product to the consumer. It's really important to keep that focus and that mental fortitude, I guess you could say, for that. So I think that's very true in all entrepreneur business minded folks, or even in sports. You mentioned sports. I know we had the Masters over the weekend, and having that time to, let's say, develop your skills before that trophy or that prize money or that accomplishment happens, I think is really important. And I think that Mike Tyson made a point about this, which I thought was really um, uh, interesting. And he said, you have to be the champion before you are the champion. And so I think for me, it means you have to put yourself in that mindset of being the one who's accomplished it before it has even been accomplished. So that's insightful. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Well, thanks for taking the time. Any last words? I know we've got something coming up on the 23rd, which is a time for the county to kind of hear final comments from the public. Any call to action you'd say for somebody who, believes in the vision that you have and wants to support? Any call to action on that, and anything that you'd
Yeah,
like to share?
no, you bet. So we have a website, which is livedanareserve.com, and there is a pop-up that you can fill out and just give a little bit of information. And if you said you want us to come support the project, get you information about how either to write a letter or how to come speak at the supervisor's hearing on the 23rd. It's a 2-day hearing, 23rd and 24th, but the speaking will probably only be in the afternoon of the 23rd. And so we would greatly appreciate it and encourage anybody that is interested in helping to get some more affordable housing in the county to come by and express your opinion.
Well, I support you in what you're doing, and especially more so now after really hearing your vision and what you're putting in there. I think it's going to be a great compliment to our county. So I'm looking forward to supporting you there and sharing my thoughts. And again, I'd just encourage anybody who's thinking about supporting to do that and make your voice be heard, because that's important, to get the support from the community and help other community members to get housing and have a lifestyle where they can all enjoy living here on the Central Coast. So I appreciate your efforts, Nick, in making that possible. I think it's very positive to our community that you're taking that on. So thank you.
Nope, you bet. Thank you.